just gonna ask if you whether you consent to being recorded and your image and likeness is going to be used for the docuseries, whether you consent to that.
Yep. I figured that was the plan.
All right. Oh, perfect. All right. And we're gonna start.
Wouldn't help a lot if I was like, nah.
Oh my gosh, what a cluster that would have been.
You're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do now.
I did not think this far. I did not plan this far. What jurisdictions do you practice in then in Canada?
I'm in Alberta, but I've done cases outside, not in Quebec, because Quebec's got its own unique sort of rules for all of that. But otherwise, I've sort of just trying to think of which provinces. I've done various things in various provinces, but now I'm just trying to remember which ones are which. And a fair bit of them are sort of behind the scenes work where I'm doing like consulting or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So, which area of law do you really specialize in?
I mean, the Law Society doesn't like the term specialized, but I just do criminal defense and firearm stuff is basically what I enjoy doing.
You have a YouTube channel that you've been running for quite a while. Not exactly sure of the time that you're running. We can talk about that. But I wanted to ask.
I have to actually pull it up.
I wanted to ask you. Did you start your YouTube channel to spite Amber Heard?
Oh no, I started it because. So the reason why I started the channel was I had a Facebook page talking about firearm stuff, and it looks like I started it in 2020. So basically, I talked about sort of gun law issues and so forth, and there was a guy who kept being in my comments saying, "You need to start a YouTube channel. You need to start a YouTube channel," and I was going, "Nobody wants to see that. I'm going to be boring as heck." But he kept insisting, and there were some other people I saw who had channels where I was like, maybe because I was thinking of channels as like some of the heavily edited, kind of thing. And I'm like, I don't know how to edit a video. I don't know how to do like animations or anything like that. But eventually I was like, well, maybe I could do that. And so I made a first video, and I was literally so nervous about it that I posted it just as my wife and I were going camping because I knew that otherwise I'd just take it down and just be like, oh, that was embarrassing. But it was a lot more successful than I expected it to be. And so I was like, well, I guess I should maybe make another video. And I've been at it ever since. But Amber Heard was not on my radar when I made the channel. Didn't know, I didn't know anything about the case at that point. Just literally was unaware.
All right, so it wasn't just by Amber Heard. Okay, perfect. Now,
no, not in the least.
I had to ask that because that was the media narrative that for some reason every YouTuber just seemed to cash in this moment and show this contempt towards a victim of domestic violence. No. So
I mean, at the start of it, I thought that Depp's case was basically non-existent. I didn't think that there was any way he would be able to get over sort of the defamation hurdle, because it's a serious hurdle, just in terms of the legal tests. So I actually thought it would probably be kind of boring for that reason. And it was only later on that I was like, okay, I was like, wow, he could win this. And so that's when I got interested, when I was like, oh, this could actually be a case.
So you said that you didn't think that Depp had a chance. Remarkably, you're not the only person that I've spoken to have shared this opinion. Which part changed your mind? Like, what did you specifically see that made you think, he actually stands a chance?
Well, started with Depp's testimony, because I looked at it and I said, well, If he can make out these claims that he's making, then, and I was like, and I think I said I was appearing on Legal Bites' channel at the time, and I said, like, this is going to be a tough battle for him, but really what this will come down to is Amber's testimony. Because once he testified, I was like, all right, if he can make this out, then great. But really the challenge at that point was going to be, what was Amber going to say? And how, more importantly, like, was her testimony going to be believable? Was it going to be... And I basically said, like, so long as her testimony is believable, Depp is done. But if her testimony is bad, then he's going to win it. That's what it's going to come down to. And so we saw her testimony, and I was actually quite startled by how bad it was.
What stuck out to you that was quote unquote bad? Because
well, I mean, there's a few things that really struck me. One of the things was so when people lie about various things, but especially about these kinds of attacks, they tend to make their stories too good, if that makes sense. Like, they're just too lurid. Whereas a lot of, like, I do criminal defense, so I see tons and tons of domestic violence cases, and typically they're very pedestrian. They're very sort of ordinary. The facts aren't like, but her story was spun up into something that was larger than life. And so you get stories of her, like, being dragged barefoot on broken glass, and not just broken glass, but broken bottle glass. And bottle glass is different than window glass, because bottle glass has that curve to it, right? Where window glass will tend to lie flat on a surface, whereas bottle glass won't. Bottle glass, it'll be curved, so it's got points upwards, and when you step on it, it sort of seesaws up into to slice you up. It's actually quite nasty. So I've seen the kinds of injuries people get from, like, walking barefoot on broken glass.
Everybody's a liar except for Amber.
It happens where you've got, like, bar fights, or just somebody who is drunk and runs out into those situations. And I know what that looks like. That looks like hospital stays. That looks like possibly reconstructive surgery. But instead she's testifying that, oh yeah, no, I just was fine the next day. And I'm going, you what? That was so completely unlike my experience with that kind of injury, having seen it in court cases. She testified that that he smashed her head repeatedly against a tile floor. And I'm going, okay, I've seen cases like that, but that's, again, situations where you've got somebody with a serious head injury who's going to be in the hospital getting treatment and possibly dealing with lifelong, impacts from brain injuries. And she's like, oh, but it's not such a big deal for her. It's as soon as they're done, it's like, okay, well, we just move right past this. And I'm going, these should really be like life-changing injuries. That's what we're looking at with these kind of allegations, not situations where you're just fine the next day. That's the opposite of how these work. So there were other circumstances that she testified to. There was the allegation of the flight attendant, where he's
Boston plane incident.
Yeah, and she says that he grabbed her arm and threatened to break her bones.
Oh, that's Hicksville. That's Hicksville. That's Hicksville trailer park, I think.
No, he was threatening, or that he grabbed and twisted the arm of the flight attendant. I believe. I may be misremembering now.
No.
It's been a while.
No. You're right. It's the same. Yes, that did happen.
Yeah.
Is the same. She told the same story twice, basically. So the same thing he did at Israel, he done it again on the plane. Like, yeah.
Well, with the plane, one of the things is that all of those, like the flight attendants, would be like logged. You're not flying in a plane without your name being recorded.
Absolutely.
And they're spending millions on this case, right?
Yeah.
Like literal millions of dollars. There's no way that they haven't tracked this person down if it actually happened and gotten testimony. So I'm going, all right, so we're going to see this flight attendant, really blow things open, because there's no way that an NDA isn't going to hold up against a subpoena. And I'm sitting there waiting for this flight attendant to come in and, tell us like all of these things. And I'm going, oh, they don't have the flight attendant. That's a concern because, how do you not, you would make sure you had this person.
Absolutely.
And I'm going, okay, that tells us that this is not as reported. We see the details with, she has the photographs, which she says are 2 different photographs, and we're looking at those. I did a video on this, and I was pointing out just how impossible it is. Because she says that they're 2 different photographs, not one photograph with different retouching. And, her account was that she had taken one picture and then gone and adjusted the lighting, and then she takes another picture. But she's got every hair is in exactly the same position. It's just not possible. It's not. And I'm going, so I'm sitting there looking at this going, none of this makes any sense whatsoever. And it was just, I like doing criminal law. You dream of prosecution witnesses like that because you're just thinking, this is somebody where you can really, point out that they're not honest.
Yeah, you can you can torment on the stand so much.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I've had witnesses that were sort of somewhat as bad, not as bad as that, but still bad.
Yeah.
And I had the prosecution kill the case midway through the trial. Like if it was just going like, okay, this is not worth pursuing.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So, I mean, she was just so bad as a witness that I'm going, how is it?
How did you make it?
I was actually, well, and part of it, I was just surprised she had so many, she still has supporters online. I was just like, are you guys not seeing this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat as you because that is when she lost me.
She lost me on her direct exam. Like the cross-examination. The cross-examination was icing, but I'd already, it was already clear to me that she was lying on her direct. So, I mean, Camille Vasquez did a great job on cross, but it's also in some ways an easier cross than most.
Yeah.
Because there was so much ammunition. One lawyer online, and, I sort of disagree with the way he phrased his take, but he basically said, anybody would have looked great doing that cross because, she just left so many openings.
Yeah. And,
I mean, to a certain extent, he's right, although Camille did a good job. She did a good job on that. She was impressive. It was just that how do you get this the situation that we had there?
Yeah.
It was so bad.
I mean, to add to your point in regards to how well Camille did, I never thought in my wildest dreams that she could be asked, did you get any dental work? And that, questions like that, you're like, oh, you wouldn't think about that, but it's actually material to the case. Like, you've been punching your teeth. Would you get dental work? You would get dental work for that.
Well, especially if you're a
star.
We're not talking about just random person here.
Absolutely.
We're talking about a celebrity who makes her living in substantial part on her face.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's people were, and people still are posting about, Amber Heard as, a beautiful woman, and you can't disagree with that. That's really how Hollywood is it's full of beautiful people. But, if I was getting punched in the face and and it was the entirety of my living, you better believe I'd be going to look at, to get somebody to look at that and be like, hey, am I okay?
Yeah.
It's all of the account kind of just makes me go, really? Because there's just so much stuff in it where I just kind of shake my head and go, I don't think so.
A lot of discourse has been around the lack of medical records that she didn't present, that she failed to present, I should say. Have you ever had a client that has described or been through something that she has been through and not sought medical treatment at all? Or
people, people respond to things differently. So a lot of cases don't have nearly the amount of records that we see in this case.
Yeah.
But the reason why some of the lack of records is odd in this case is precisely because we have so many other records, right? Yeah. This isn't like a case, because a lot of these cases will be somebody who's, who doesn't have the money to produce records, kind of thing.
Yep.
That's very common.
Yep.
But she's not shy on doctors. Like, she's not in a situation where she's going to have a hard time affording proper medical care, or if her doctor says, hey, it's going to be a few $100s to get that report together, she's not going to be like, oh, I have to choose between that or, paying rent this month. Yes. That's just not where she's at.
Yes, she was surrounded by doctors and nurses, when Depp was getting help for his detox issues, when he was getting help for his drug dependency issues. So I always find it strange that you have so much doctors around you, and not once did you seek treatment. How do I ask this question without coming across as insensitive? Would that be a red flag to you if you have a client that does not produce any sort of medical record? I mean, barring the fact that we've heard the audios, all those things, just because she had that. But would that be a red flag to you?
It really depends on circumstance, right? Because sometimes you've got people who have, good reasons not to seek medical attention. There's all sorts of reasons. You may have abuse victims who've been prevented from seeking medical attention and that kind of thing. But that wasn't really what we've got going on here. So, if that had been her situation, and if she was saying like, hey, I couldn't go get medical attention because, he was preventing me, but she really wasn't telling a sort of coherent story about all of this. She was telling a very hard to believe account.
Yeah.
And that made it a lot harder when you're sitting there going like, why are we getting this version of things that just doesn't make any sense?
Has a concept of mutual abuse ever come up in one of your cases, where you've tried people like this?
Oh. The thing is that there's actually a fair number of couples that get into situations where they're both both behaving badly to varying degrees.
Yeah.
And there's a variety of patterns that you can get. You can get patterns where one partner uses violence in response to the other partner. You can get situations where both are aggressive and both start fights. You can get all sorts of things, right? It's the human experience is complicated, is I guess a really short way of putting it. In criminal law, we see situations where both parties get charged and both parties get convicted of abuse for various altercations that happened. It might be that they both get charged for one incident with each other, but also you get situations of both getting charged for different incidents on different days. So on Tuesday, he's getting charged, and then on Wednesday, she's getting charged.
Yeah. Okay. So, so have you ever worked with experts that have testified to that dynamic?
A lot of the expert evidence in that sense is not admissible in a criminal trial.
Okay.
But I mean, you talk to experts just to get an idea for what's going on. Sometimes even if you can't use the expert, you're just like, hey, does this make sense to you? This is what my client is saying. Does this actually seem to, make sense? And you see that.
So would you get a testimony, like Dr. Curry and Dr. Hughes? Do you get testimonies like that in your case?
I mean, most, there just isn't the money for it in most cases. Like, the amount of money that was spent on this trial is huge.
Absolutely.
So in a lot of these cases, you're just not going to see that level of complexity and that level of what do you call it? Just the ability to spend that much.
Yeah. Damn, I forgot the word as well.
The resourcing in these trials.
Yeah.
Is
unlimited resources. It's not the right word, but I think it'll work here.
I mean, it was practically unlimited when you look at how much was spent.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that if most of my clients had that much money, they would be living very different lives than they do.
What did you make of Dr. Curry's and Dr. Hughes' performance as experts?
Well, I mean, you've got real problems with experts, and this is especially an issue with a jury trial because you've got questions of plausibility. And I'm terrible with names, but I think Dr. Hughes was Amber's expert, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I did not find her. I would have been unhappy if I'd hired her as an expert because she came off as very one-sided. She came off as very motivated, and I don't think she was terribly credible. I want an expert when I'm looking to hire an expert. I want somebody who's going to come off as the most reasonable person in the room, right? And that means somebody who looks and considers, both sides of things, but she came off more as an ideologue, and that's not great when you're, when you're trying to convince a jury or anybody. Just think about if you're trying to convince your friends about some sort of political issue, right? You think that they shouldn't vote for whichever party is currently in charge. If they think that you're somebody who's considered both sides of the issue and so forth, they're much more likely to listen to you than if you're just somebody who has never voted for the one side, would never consider it. And if you are saying this one side has this position and the other side has this position. Both of them have some strengths, but I think this one is the better one. It's a lot better than if you're sort of coming in going, no, the other side is a monster. And so I wasn't terribly impressed with that. Dr. Curry did a lot better, and you could sort of see it from the, I think Elaine's team didn't really, sort of Amber's counsel, really didn't do themselves any favors in the cross-examination because it got a little silly, like getting into muffins and so forth.
When an expert is telling you, can we please stop talking about muffins? I think you're in big trouble.
Well, I mean, if the problem is if the jury thinks that the expert is being evasive there, then that's great, right? Can we stop talking about this? And the jury's like, no, I want to hear more. That would be fantastic. But I don't think that there was a single juror who's sitting there going, this case is really going to hinge on the muffins. I mean, it was clear that they were trying to establish some sort of bias there, but I don't think it landed. And she came off as much more sort of reasonable in terms of considering multiple sides of things. You got to be careful with experts. If you've got an expert that seems too good, you got to ask yourself, is this actually going to play well with the jury? Because it might not. And I think that was a real problem.
How can that how can that backfire if you are too good? Like how can that be a downside?
Well, if they just don't believe that your expert is actually somebody that they can trust, right? Ideally, an expert should be somebody who's helping you get to the real truth of the matter, not somebody who is there, to just... Because a lot of jurors, when they're in a courtroom, basically feel like everybody is full of crap and everybody is trying to lead them, everyone's trying to mislead them to one degree or another. And so if what they decide at the end of all of this is that your expert is just another person trying to mislead them, then they're not likely to take your expert as worth very much. They're just going to say, "Oh, this is yet another person with the same sort of take."
There was a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk about juror misconduct, etc. They may have gone on social media. I'm sure you may have seen Elaine's 15 minutes of fame presto, and and she's lamenting and saying, "Oh, the jurors, how could they have not seen this case?" You were in the courtroom. Did you see any jurors on their phone? Were they...
Oh, certainly not at the courthouse or anything like that. I mean, you can't ever know for certain.
Yeah.
But I think it's a hell of an allegation for counsel to make about the jurors when she had nothing to support it. Most jurors actually do take their oaths pretty seriously, and I think these, I didn't see anything to tell me that these jurors were not anything but people just trying to be diligent about about what they're asked to do. So,
okay.
I mean, it's always possible, but I don't see any actual evidence of it, and I'm not really happy if I see an officer of the court saying, "Well, they must have been on their on social media without something to back it up."
Absolutely.
That's the kind of allegation I'd want to have some actual evidence to make, not to just be like, "Oh yeah, well, we lost, so clearly it was social media."
When you were in the trial and then you saw, did you see Amber get cross-examined live in the court, or was that online?
Yeah, I saw some of the cross. Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay, so when she was getting cross-examined, what was the jury's reaction like? Because I'm trying to piece together what their faces would have looked like when she tried to explain pledge and donation. Please give me a snapshot. Please.
I mean, the jury was getting a little, during her direct, they were getting a little tired, and it was clear that they were sort of like, and this is not what you want when you. Normally, the jury at this point should be pretty focused on what she's saying, and I would say it's concerning for for Amber's side if they're not. Typically, also where you've got anything with domestic violence, what I'd expect to see is I normally would expect to see Camille standing up to a very unfriendly room, and what I mean by that is that she'd be looking at jurors who don't want to hear from her, right? Who already have kind of decided that this cross-examination is going to be a little, that it's tacky, upsetting to them that it's happening.
Yeah, tacky.
So, when you're a defense lawyer, if you're standing up to, to cross-examine the Crown, in Canada, Crown witnesses, and especially the complainant, typically what you're expecting to see is, that they kind of think you're a jerk, and you have to convince them out of it, and you have to convince them that, that there's some basis for why you're giving this, poor witness grief. What I instead saw was witness or jurors who were like keen. They were sort of like, oh, good, now we get to see this.
Oh.
And that's a bad place for Amber's team.
Yeah, Camille done an interview recently where she actually said this. She actually said that she was looking at the first, I think, 5 jurors or 10 jurors or something like that, and 3 of them were planted on her, like looking at her, and whenever she asked a question, and then she said, I've got them at that point.
Yeah.
In your experience, have you ever had jurors actually pay attention to you?
You hope to get them to that point.
Yeah.
It's rare that they're starting there, as a defense lawyer or anybody where you're sort of dealing with like an allegation of, of this kind of, thing, right? It'd be very unusual that they're already there at the start of things. So, I was just like, I saw that and I was like, this is bad for Amber.
You were talking about Amber Heard supporters before and how she still has supporters. And I remember when you were in a Legal Bites charity stream and you shared you shared a story in regards to one of the supporters. Could you, if you don't mind, could you please share that again? Could you share that again?
Well,
yeah.
There was a woman who was at the, and I was being very careful to make sure she never ended up on video, but she was there and she was sort of being quiet, but she noted that she was there to support Amber. And, I didn't want to sort of call attention to her because, it's everybody's there for their own reasons and you're not trying to, but I knew that there were some people who might not be happy with that. I mean, there's a variety of people in that crowd, right? Mm. So I sort of was like, okay, cool. Hey, welcome. And later I saw her and she was quite upset. And I actually went to go talk to her because I was kind of concerned. I was worried that basically one of the, that she'd gotten sort of a hard time from somebody in the gallery. Mm. And so I went up and basically was like, hey, is everything wrong or everything right? And she was saying, well, she was really upset because she said basically that she'd come there to support Amber. And after watching Amber's testimony, she was like, she's just lying up there.
Yeah.
And it was kind of tragic because a lot of people came to this case and a lot of people in the gallery were interested in the case because of sort of personal histories of abuse. And, I think that that's a reason why a lot of people sort of wanted to, sort of stand, a lot of, when you see a lot of the, like, I stand with Amber, you get a lot of people saying like, this is important to me because I'm a survivor. Yeah. And I'm going, okay, that's, fair ball. Its case has some significance to you. Okay. But, there were a lot of people as well who said basically like who watched it and said that they didn't find that Amber resonated with them as survivors, but that instead that they found her more like their abusers. And, so that's a rough place to be.
Yeah. What a change of, what a change of events that is, to go from seeing her as a possible victim and then bang, she's the abuser.
I mean, there were a lot of people who watched the trial online who basically said the same thing, who basically said that they were expecting to be cheering for, like Depp's downfall, and instead went, oh, this is not what I'm watching.
Was that the only instance that you've seen that support, or has there been other instances like that?
There were other supporters there, but I didn't get the opportunity to sort of follow up with any of the others. Most of the sort of there were a few people there who had sort of mentioned that they were there as Amber supporters. Most of them just kind of left quietly after the trial because, I mean, it was a very sort of pro-Depp environment outside the courthouse. I know there's been people saying things like people were shouting at Amber or anything. I didn't see any of that. What I saw instead was a lot of people who had, signs and were cheering Depp. Nobody was like, I want to go see Amber leave the courthouse. They were like, I want to go see Depp leave the courthouse.
Yeah.
So,
so going back to the courtroom for a bit and switching gears, have you ever had a client be accused of defecating the bed?
Not the bed, no. I mean, I've had situations where clients were accused of incontinence. I've had situations where clients were intoxicated and alleged to have done various things in the back of a police car. That's a different scenario. So
I wonder what that police car was like. But never one in a bed. Like
I mean, the thing is that there's when you get into like abusive behavior, people do all sorts of crappy things to each other, pardon the pun. But there's a range of different things people do. So you'll get people who will destroy cherished, belongings of the other, person. There's all sorts of possibilities there. And the sad thing is that there's an infinite number of ways to lash out. It's just one that I think has captured a lot of people's interest because it's kind of funny. But at the same time, I imagine it wasn't at the time. Like, and when you watch Depp testifying about it, he's, there's a sadness to it as well. It's like, this is just kind of how people reach out to hurt each other sometimes.
Is that normal to see, someone that is being deposed to be eating and doing,
I mean,
things like that?
One of Depp's witnesses was also like driving in his deposition.
Oh yeah, I'm vaping. Yeah, I completely forgot about that.
So, I mean, I don't put a whole lot on, a lot of depositions are done in very, you don't have the full formal pomp and circumstance of the courthouse. So, and there's no judge there to yell at you if you eat. So,
so it's not something that is a big deal, really, if it was to happen. Sorry for putting.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I sort of go. I don't care if she was snacking. So, and I mean, I know that people out there are like, oh, this guy's just for Johnny Depp. I'm like, I don't care. Some of the people who I see on the sort of Depp side who are like, making big noise about this, I go, not so much. I got flack as well for like on Twitter midway through the trial. I'd say like, this was, this was a good argument from the Heard side, and might move the needle a bit. And people would be like, oh, you can't say that. I went, well, it's true though, right? And I mean, one of the sad things is that Heard's side probably could have won it if it wasn't a situation of, I kind of feel like Heard's side was probably undercut by Heard's instructions. But we'll never know that for certain.
Switching gears a little bit, what is a demonstrative evidence?
So that's sort of anything like demonstrative evidence is ways of showing the jury things. So not necessarily things that actually occurred, but like, a model, a reconstructive picture. So it's the opposite of like, real physical evidence or anything like that. It's in some ways it's kind of imagined evidence, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But
Fair enough. You used the word imagined evidence. Did you see the whole when Elaine went up and was using Milani's makeup palette and saying that Amber was using this during?
Well, yeah, there was that interesting trade up from it being, this is the evidence that we've got, that we then see gets changed up to, well, she used something like this.
Yeah.
And I predicted that was going to be an angle that we'd see that trade up once it was clear that makeup didn't exist at the time. And in fact, we saw Elaine back away from that. So
okay, so this is what struck me as interesting, because is that usually like, because I've seen some YouTube channels try to explain in a way and say no, Elaine was not saying this was the actual one. She was presenting demonstrative evidence. So is that usually how you do it? Like, is that, do you present this in an opening statement, etc.? And
I think she got caught out and got surprised. There were a couple of moments where I thought that Elaine got a bit surprised by the evidence not matching what she thought it was going to match. There's another moment, and I pointed this out in a video. But with the mirror, there's a moment where she asks Amber a question, and you can see her readjusting, as you know, because I don't think she expected the answer she was going to get. So you can see her sort of, she starts to ask the next question, she stops, pauses for like a half second, and then asks a different question. And I think that's because it looked to me like she asked a question, got an answer she didn't expect from her own witness, from Amber, and then went, I need to. And the thing is, she did really well, like steering that, away.
If you were to present a demonstrative evidence to the court, would you normally put it through as a trial exhibit, or do you just speak to the judge to like try and say, hey, I got this evidence, it's not really contemporaneous, may I use it?
I mean, there's places where you can sort of show things off and whatever else. Just in the opening statement, if I knew that it wasn't this particular brand of makeup, I would have said, used makeup like that, or used a makeup kit, and hold it up, but you don't necessarily need to describe it or anything. Just people will know what you're holding, right? And say, she used a makeup kit in order to, conceal this. But saying like, this is the like that kind of thing. I was like, nope, she got surprised by that one.
Do you think it's something to do with her trying to go for shock value because of the cameras around, etc.? Like, do you think that kind of flushed her out a little bit?
I don't think it was the cameras there. I mean, you've got a jury, right? There's going to be a bit of showmanship, right?
Fair enough.
So that's just a common thing with a jury. You got to keep people's interest. You got to keep people's attention, because if you're just going, and like reading in a monotone or something, it's going to bore the jury. They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to treat you with respect. It's not fantastic.
I've seen other lawyers cover this case, and they were, in my opinion, I thought they were Amber Heard supporters, which did strike me as odd a little bit. But I saw them make the argument that that cameras shouldn't be in court because it can sway, it can cause a lot of prejudice. Maybe no, she didn't use the word prejudice, but it was just more of like for example, it can cause a witness to be too flushed, or because they know that people are watching them, for example, or it can just cause a witness to like overperform or underperform. You know, like all these factors play in. That's what she was trying to argue. What do you think about the impacts of cameras in court?
I was in that courtroom. I can tell you the cameras were very unobtrusive. They were really difficult to notice. And people tend to worry more about like the faces in a courtroom rather than like a camera.
Okay.
I don't think that really affected the witnesses. I mean, there's people argue about it, and here in Canada, we don't film our court cases, but I actually think that this is a really good example of why we should. And that's in part because the media was doing a very poor job of reporting what was actually happening in the courtroom. And so we saw this really like this rift between people who were watching the trial and people who were getting their information from media reports about the day. Because the media reports about the day were first kind of pushing a viewpoint. And second, they were really just reporting on like little snippets or little like snapshot moments and not the whole thing. But a lot of it is, I mean, a lot of this case came down to questions of credibility. You know, when you watch this witness, do you believe them? Do you? And so as a member of the public who's trying to watch this, like trying to know about this trial, what's a better impression of credibility? Hearing some reporter saying, you know, Amber testified to this and I believed her, or actually watching her testify and being able to make your own call on that. I think we actually saw this huge gap between people and ultimately the people who watched the whole trial were the better informed people. So
I'm guessing that you're a big proponent of having cameras in the court then, like if possible.
I mean, there's got to be situations where you might not. Like if it's a, if the trial is a sex assault trial, you know, a criminal trial, or, you know, involves children, you might want to say maybe not. But here we're talking about a case that involved celebrities and where they'd already, you know, basically aired a lot of this, you know, publicly beforehand. So there wasn't a whole lot of reason to say we got to keep this hidden because it was already sort of out there. So the only thing that left to show was what's actually happening in the courtroom. How does the court system function? Because, you know, here in Canada, I see a lot of people who have incorrect assumptions about how the court functions. Sometimes they watch U.S. courts and they say, oh, it works the same way. And there's similarities, but there's also differences.
Yeah.
And I feel like we'd have a better understanding of our court system here in Canada if we film trials, as well as perhaps more respect for it. A lot of people right now hold the court system in skepticism, and I think part of that is just that they don't see what actually happens.
Okay, and I don't disagree with you. I think a lot of distrust, because they do, to add to your point, they do actually see like wrongful convictions, etc., and they're like, well, I don't know how you arrived at that. So, do you know what I mean? Like how did you mess this one up? So sort of thing. So, do you think it would have things would improve if people can join into that process and they could be perhaps? I mean, I don't think it would change wrongful convictions, but would it improve in terms of public perception of the courts?
I think that we'd see a lot of public perceptions improving. And to the extent that our courts do things badly or do things wrong, if there's injustice happening in our courts, that's also something we should shine a light on, not keep hidden. You know, if you're saying like, oh, people will be upset by the court system, if they're upset by what's actually happening in there, then maybe they should be. Maybe, the court system is an essential part of the functioning of a society. And people should either have confidence in it or be able to advocate meaningfully and from an informed perspective for change. So They can't do that if they're kept in the dark.
Last few questions. Do you think the jury got it right on this one? And why?
I think they did. And I think the jury took it very seriously. I think the jury was very, very thoughtful about how they approached it. And I mean, ultimately, if anything, they were perhaps overly fair to Amber. I actually would have, and I mean, this is more on the judge's decisions. I am a little skeptical of the notion of the lawyer's statements being held against the client.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they found that one of those statements was actionable in terms of, Depp being liable for that. I don't think if I was the jury, like if I was all the members of the jury, I don't think that I would have made that ruling. But I mean, we have juries to think about these things and to make those sorts of considerations. And, I don't think that they were, I don't think that any of the sort of allegations people have made about the jurors and them saying like, oh, they didn't take it seriously or, whatever were accurate. Most of the jurors were, in fact, focused in for just about the whole trial, including in parts that were really difficult. There was a day that was just depositions, and I'm sitting in the courtroom just watching these video depositions, and I'm going, oh my God, I just want to die. This is so boring. And I see the jurors, and they're sitting there, they're studiously paying attention, and I'm going,
wow.
Bless them, because I couldn't.
That is actually a great, a unique vantage point, because I've seen, I've heard other people, and I'm not sure how true this is, that they were sleeping in the court, and I was like, it struck me as odd. I'm like, why would someone allege that they're sleeping? I think it was from. But I think they got it from the court report. No, sorry, Julie, the court transcriber. I forgot, stenographer.
The one juror was, I think, a little checked out. I don't think that he was,
sleeping.
But
yeah,
one juror was a little checked out. Most of them were paying attention, so it wasn't like you've got a room full of sleeping jurors or anything like that. One of them may have drifted off. That's what I mean. She didn't say it like that, but she said, what did she say? She said that she noticed one of the she actually said one of them was having it hard to keep up with the depositions, because she was transcribing, speaking to that experience. And I mean,
it was a frenzy on Twitter, like, oh, the jurors were sleeping, this and that. I was like, anyway.
Yeah, I recall one juror, if I recall correctly. I'd have to actually go through my notebooks, but I think one juror got nudged on that day. But that doesn't mean that like everybody was passed out or the like. It's just it's just that you've got a situation of people having to struggle with difficult to pay attention to evidence. But a lot of the there were jurors who were just locked on, laser focused the whole time, including at times when I was struggling to, I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, I want to sleep. And I know that I can't, because they would throw me out if I started sleeping in there. Well, towards the end of it, just because the lineup was keeping us awake, there were some of the people who were there every day were starting to be unable to actually to focus well enough to stay awake. Yeah.
Okay, so I think it took the jurors, I think they said 12 hours, but I got this from NBC, so I don't really rely on that. But I think they took three days to decide the verdict, because I think the case ended on the 27th. They came out with a verdict on the 1st, so it's quite a bit of a time. And is that normal that it would take that long for a jury to decide on this case? Because
I mean, juries are all over, and in terms of timing, sometimes you get, sometimes you get really fast.
Yeah. Like 18 minutes with Anthony Rapp, the Anthony Rapp case with Kevin Spacey. That was 80 minutes to decide that Spacey wasn't liable.
Well, and I watched a U.S. trial that was just like a small trial, but it was like just something like a robbery on the street or something. And the jury basically had time to walk out, and then we're like, yeah, we've got our verdict. And they found the guy guilty because there just wasn't an argument. It was like they were basically, the defense was hoping for a miracle or for like a prosecution screw up. So they basically just walked out and then walked back in, basically going, yep, we done.
There was also talk of a fake juror that came into the case. Did you hear about that talk?
Yeah, I heard the discussion, which was basically like, hey, we think that this, that we got junior when we were supposed to have senior or whatever. And, I thought the way the judge dealt with that was entirely fine, which was, let's look at the legislation. Let's look at what the law says here. The statutes say you've got a time to make that complaint. You didn't. And the obligation is on you to find this out. Like, you are the guys who investigate this. You were not short of money on this case to make investigations. So either you sat on this for tactical reasons, in which case,
no.
That's on you, or you missed it and that's still on you. So, yeah.
How often has that ever happened to you? Like, does that actually happen where someone that wasn't summoned but turns up and then they're part of the jury?
I mean, that would be very weird. I just don't know. But the judge is just like, I'm not throwing this out based on your failure to look into this. So,
trust me, it was wild. I've seen people say, "Oh, that juror was a Depp fan that wanted to crash into the case and make sure that he swayed everybody." It was insane. like, dude.
Based on what they said, I suspect if there was anything around that, it was, it would have been somebody getting a summons for because they had the same name was the suggestion.
Yeah.
It would have just been like getting this form and going, oh, this is mine. I'll go, my summons. This notion that it was like some conspiracy for somebody. Nobody wants to be a juror. Like, being a juror sucks. Even on a high profile case that you're thinking is really interesting, like when you're sitting there on those depo days, that's just going to suck. So, it's, I don't think that notion of like this guy wanted to be on the jury and like arranged it, like it just, there's a lot of reaching to like, let's, say that this verdict was bad for some reason. And I'm going, no, it's just, it's just an ordinary court case, just with a ton more money.
Yeah. And people got butthurt by the verdicts, but yeah. Oh yeah, for full disclosure, the judge did actually bring out the document to show that he actually filled out himself and he was actually the person that was summoned.
So it's the right person in the end.
Yeah, it was the right person. Just the person that filled out was actually the person that was supposed to fill out. It's 72.
So,
70, yeah.
So, I mean, yeah.
But
it's
anyway.
like, who, of all the things to dig for, it's like at the end of the trial, you're really going to make that noise now? So, yeah.
I mean, if I could put my tinfoil hat on, I would bet 100% that it was Amber that saw this opportunity and was like, let's go for the media attack because they're not going to, let's try and taint it as much as possible. And
I don't know. I mean, I just kind of shake my head at that whole thing and go, whatever.
Yeah. Well, Ian, thank you so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate.
No problem. It's
yeah, like your courtroom experience and being there for all of this. it's valuable. It's valuable because not a lot of us got that opportunity. So I appreciate you for sharing and for sharing that story again, because when I heard it the first time, I had the chills. I was like, whoa, someone actually said this.
It was a weird moment, and I just it's just one of those. It was a weird high sort of energy area, that trial. And I hope that woman's okay. Like, that's really what, at the end of it, I hope she's all right. And if she ever sees this and feels like reaching out, and, like, it'll never end up in a video or anything. It's just, if she needs help or if there's something going on there, I'd be happy to help her out. Cause, you feel bad for people in that sort of difficult scenario there. So I just hope she's okay. That's yeah.
I don't disagree. But yeah, thank you so much for sitting down with me. And
no worries.
Hopefully you have a great morning for me. So I get to seize the day properly, carpe diem and all that.
Fair enough. Well, have a great morning and a great rest of your day, and thank you for having me on.